Season 5, new ways to play, new weapons, Easter egg hunts. We're doing it all live over on my Twitch channel if you want to come hang out and join in on the discussion. I'd love to see you out there if you're willing, so if you want to hang out and chat, links in the description below. Meta Warfare's 5th season kicked off this week, and that means another look at what's the best weaponry to use in order to dominate. Despite a ton of content additions with a new seasonal launch of the game, we saw minimal done to weapon balancing contenders for knocking out weaponry down in previous placings. But for transparency, as we always do with seasonal launches, I wanted to talk about the 5 best weapons and loadouts for you to use in Warzone and completely shred through your enemies. But on top of that, I also want to recommend later on in the video a few weapons worth trying out that, with the right skill, knowledge, and situational approaches, can absolutely challenge the meta weapons if you don't want to use the same old, same old. So today, as we go along, leave your thoughts down below. What do you think is the best weapon in Warzone? And as well, when do you think we'll see some new meta shakeups? Drop your thoughts below in the comments, but if you are new to the channel, do be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with all things Modern Warfare, Warzone, and COD 2020 as we round into what's going to be an exciting few weeks of content. But anyways, let's get into it. First things first, I do want to address that idea of weapon rebalancing coming. While we have nothing from the update that's truly game-changing, we saw some minor details done to a few weapons and some adjustments there. It was listed in the patch notes that more weapon adjustments will be coming in the future and that players should stay tuned for those adjustments. As for any other details, those weren't given, but if I were to take an educated guess, it would be around the mid-season update or shortly thereafter, given that we see COD champs happening at the end of the month. Now, I would imagine with so much money on the line for the pros, this is a direct appeal to them so that they don't have to relearn or readjust right before a multi-million-dollar tournament. For the casuals and hardcore public community like us, that kind of sucks, but those huge style changes have happened so many times in past games right before majors, so I understand why, with so much on the line, it may be held off just for a little bit more. When the time comes, of course, we'll reevaluate the list of weaponry here, but for the time being, we do have what we have. So let's start out with number 1. The best weapon in my mind, without a doubt, is the Bruin. If you've played Warzone, I guarantee that you've come into some situation where somebody's using a Bruin, and probably if you make your way into those higher skill brackets, that's basically all you end up seeing. People either sitting in corners mounted with these things or just absolutely gunning at a distance because it doesn't have any recoil with the right loadout. Plus, it has the damage output of that of an LMG, which has a higher damage profile than most other weapons, and even still, some of the mobility of a rifle, which makes this absolutely insane. You don't really lose out on basically anything, and it's just a powerhouse machine of a weapon that can absolutely tear through your enemies. Personally, I like to run the following on it: the monolithic suppressor, the XRK Horizon 23-inch barrel, the TAC laser, the VLK 3x optic, and the 60-round magazine. Monolithic suppressor, we've gone over it so many times, keeps you off the radar, adds that damage range, so it's something you definitely really want to have. The XRK Horizon barrel ends up helping out with that bullet velocity and damage range. The TAC laser adds a little bit more in terms of that ADS speed, making it less bulky than that of what a normal LMG loadout would be. The VLK 3x optic gives you that pinpoint precision, but also it offers that unnamed recoil mitigation that helps you keep that shot a little more stable at a distance. And also that 60-round mag, rounding everything off, improves that mobility, that handling a little bit, so you have that ability to run around a little further, but also still keeps you in the action enough that you don't have to worry about running out of ammo. If you don't have the Bruin unlocked, I highly recommend doing so. If you want to play around with it, maybe just at a base level, it is something that is nice. It's ground loot again this season, so you can get it right off the rip, but definitely number 1 here in my books. Number 2 is one that, in terms of overall versatility, may not be the most capable of weapons for every single scenario, but you can kit it out individually so that it maximizes the potential in each of those scenarios. The FAL is semi-auto, so it may not be for everybody, but where it makes up in that rate of fire is in the damage per shot. The FAL is incredible in its damage profile and has a potential to two-shot if you end up having things like, say, stopping power, you hit some consistent headies. It is an absolute melt machine of a weapon, and like last season, you probably saw some clips right off the rip. If you got that as a starting weapon on the ground, you were in good shape. So once you end up getting it and you actually maximize it for its potential and however you want to use it, it is definitely a dangerous weapon to have. Personally, on this, I run the monolithic suppressor, the XRK marksman barrel, the GI mini reflex or VLK 3x optic, the Merc foregrip, and the 30-round magazine. Of course, we've talked about why these are important in each of these. The monolithic suppressor keeps you off the radar, but also ends up adding that extra damage range. The XRK marksman does the same as well with the bullet velocity and damage range. The GI mini reflex or the VLK 3x whatever you want ends up just adding that little bit of a pinpoint precise accuracy accuracy to your shot. I'm not a fan of the iron sights of the FAL, so a sight's always a must here on this one for me. The 30-round magazine just keeps you in the action a little bit more, and you don't have to reload. Ammunition is always great to have in Warzone, as common sense as that sounds. 20 rounds just doesn't do it, so nor does 24 in my opinion. 30 is perfect, even though you sacrifice a little bit more in that mobility and of course then that reload speed. The Merc foregrip is something that adds a little bit more stabilization and that hip fire, which can come in handy a little further, but that is definitely what I would recommend running on here, and if you use that, I guarantee you'll shred through some enemies. Next up here, number 3 is the partner in crime to almost every single one of my loadouts that I end up running, the Mentos to the Coke for explosive gameplay, that being the MP5. You can play absolutely aggressive here at this one, and with honestly no real counterparts replacing what this could do for your close quarters game. The MP5 is just simply put my favorite SMG, and I think probably the best hands down of the SMGs. There are a few that situationally can kind of come close, but for overall versatility, the MP5 still takes that cake as number 1. For this, I end up running the monolithic integral suppressor, getting a little bit of that monolithic suppressor and barrel benefits all in one, and at the cost of only 1 attachment rather than 2. The Merc foregrip for that hip fire accuracy and a little bit more stability. The 45 round magazines to challenge more than one gunfight at a time. The stippled grip tape to get that gun up a little faster, and then sleight of hand, because honestly, this one is really up to you. I just found myself in so many 1v3, 1v4 situations as of recently that while knocking 2 or 3 of those 3 or 4, that half second that I lost on reload or something like that, I just couldn't finish off the 4th one or the 3rd one to finish off the wipe. So just because it burned me so many times, I put on sleight of hand instead of something else. But it is absolutely a weapon that you should try out. This loadout for sure is one that I think will annihilate your enemy's close quarters. And again, you end up running overkill with this on either, say, your Bruin, your Grau, your FAL, whatever you want to run as a primary. It is absolutely fantastic for your close quarters weaponry, and you can just push through and keep pushing. Number 4 on the list is one that was previously number 1, but I think has kind of slipped down a little bit because of new weapon adjustments in the past that have been made, new weapons introduced, and some of their overall versatility and usefulness, but that being the Grau. Now, the Grau we've talked about here many times, have kind of beaten it to death. Again, it's been a meta weapon for so long, but even though it's not number 1, it is still a fantastic weapon that will get the job done in almost any circumstance. For the Grau, I'd end up running the monolithic suppressor, the Tempest 26.4-inch Archangel barrel, the Commando foregrip, the 50 or 60 round magazine, depending on, as stupid as it sounds, and admittedly, if you have a blueprint that has a cool variant camo on it, that kind of determines for me if I end up running a 50 or 60 round magazine. Really, it's up to you. There's quite literally a 1 frame difference between 50 round and 60 round magazines in terms of that difference in mobility and speed with ADS, so that's completely up to you. Then finally, we end up running the Cronin Sniper Elite for extra added stability and control while aiming down sight and shooting. As weird as it sounds, if I want to deviate a little bit away from using the main meta weapons, the Grau has kind of been that fallback because it's a weapon that absolutely will destroy enemies, but it's not necessarily considered the meta right now because the Bruin, the FAL, the MP5, they're so meta that they're basically in their own league right now. But the Grau's still a fantastic weapon, just not necessarily having that crown like it did as of last season or with its initial introduction. The final of our top 5 weapons that I can confidently say I would recommend here to you is that of the Kilo 141. Now, you've probably seen the Kilo in a ton of gameplays here on the channel. I was and still am a huge fan of the Kilo. It was actually that weapon that I was kind of transitioning myself into because pre-Season 4 mid-season update, we kind of thought that the Grau would be nerfed into the ground. Turns out it wasn't, but in preparation for needing to use a new weapon outside of the Grau, I transitioned then into using the Kilo, and I got so comfortable with it, I felt like I was frying with it so much that it became a mainstay on the channel and of course in my loadouts. Now of course, since then, a couple of weapons, as we've just mentioned, have kind of pushed that out of the mainstay that we normally use, but it's still a weapon that can absolutely shred through your enemies. It'll take some getting used to if you don't use it all that much, but once you do, you might not want to go back. For this, we end up running the monolithic suppressor, the Syngard Arms 19.8-inch Prowler barrel, the TAC laser, the VLK 3x optic, and the 60-round magazine. Now, all of these are basically pretty self-explanatory for reasons we've already discussed here in this video. Monolithic, of course, keeping you off that radar, increasing that damage range. Same with the Prowler. TAC laser increases the ADS speed, VLK, pinpoint precision, and recoil stabilization, and 60-round magazines, giving you a little bit more in terms of staying in the fight a little longer. But like we mentioned, the Kilo is one that I thought was going going to be that main contender, but unfortunately didn't quite make it up to standards just because of the plans that Infinity Ward had for other weaponry. But absolutely still a great weapon, and honestly, like the Grau, one of my mainstays whenever I just want to fall back and not use the meta weapons. But okay, those are the main top 5 weapons in Warzone and Modern Warfare, but those are meta. Again, what if you don't want to use that? Well, fortunately, there's actually some weapons you can use that do challenge that meta a little bit and can be a little fun here for this. One of my favorite classes alternatively to run is that of an SMG, and I guess you can call it a sniping class as well, to which I end up running the MP7 and CAR. For the MP7, I'd recommend running the monolithic suppressor, the FSS recon barrel, the tac laser, the Merc foregrip, and the 60 round magazine. This is great for close quarters running through enemies, but also even at mid-range, you can just be super annoying by shredding through armor with the sheer fire rate of the weapon, but also you can secure those kills if you're accurate enough. Then we end up overkilling that with the Kar 98K, which has the monolithic suppressor, the SynGuard custom 27.6-inch barrel, the tac laser, the sniper scope. You can use the dual zoom if you prefer the optic on that, then also sleight of hand for a little bit faster reloading. This loadout's a little bit more built for, say, mobility and also then picking off players at a distance if you want to get up close and personal, but also still have that safety net of being able to snipe some players. Next, I'd definitely recommend trying out the AN94. I know that it doesn't crack my top 5. Does it crack my top 10 in terms of overall usefulness? That's something that I'm still trying to figure out for myself, but the times that I used it, it was pretty nice. It felt good. It felt like a little bit more of a mobile CR56. The CR56 we've talked about was one that was going to be a meta weapon, I think, but then they nerfed it into the ground a little bit, so the AN kind of could take its place here with this. On that, I normally run the monolithic suppressor, the AN94 factory X438mm barrel, the tac laser, the VLK 3x optic, and the 60 round casket mags, all for the same reasons that we've discussed here in the past. Another one that is honestly a lot of fun to play around with and could theoretically challenge some of the meta, though I don't think it will break the MP7 or the MP5, is that of the new ISO. Admittedly, I don't have the ISO entirely ranked up, but having played around a little bit with it in MP, having played a little bit with it in Warzone as well, for this, I would recommend running the FSS Nightshade, which is basically your monolithic integral suppressor, the tac laser, the Merc foregrip, the 50 round drum mag, and the FTAC Elite ISO grip. So you have a little bit of that mobility as well as, of course, that ammo and damage potential that you end up wanting in an SMG as that secondary, perhaps. And finally, the last weapon that I would definitely recommend running is that of the M13. We've talked about this one beforehand, where at mid to long range, it's a powerhouse. Close quarters and a lot of your other rifle engagements up closer might not be your best choice because it excels with that headshot multiplier at a distance, but still it's absolutely worth checking out, to which I run the monolithic suppressor, the Tempest marksman barrel, the tac laser, the VLK 3x optic, and the 60 round magazine. Now we've talked about the builds of all of these weapons, but for this we end up running relatively similar perks and extracurriculars of equipment. So for perks we end up running EOD because EOD saves lives, especially if you play aggressive. C4 and other explosives won't kill you or down you in one hit or do tremendous amount of damage in one hit. It will take at least 2 on you, but I've taken that 100% over things, say, like cold-blooded as of recently. Overkill is usually used on most of my loadouts, and then amped as well to swap weapons faster. Once you go amped and you realize how fast you swap weapons and you play aggressive, you'll never want to go back. Then for equipment, we end up running C4 as well as then a heartbeat sensor, or if you want to play stuns, that's a great way to do so as well. But all in all, that is my top 5, and I guess top 10 if you want to play around with other weapons on top of that here for Season 5 in terms of Warzone. So that's where we're going to wrap it up. I'd love to get your thoughts and feedback down there in the comment section down below. What weapon do you have the most fun with here in Warzone? What weapon do you want to see as the new meta? Maybe what do you want to see taken out of the meta? Whatever it is, let me know. But hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to drop a like down below. And of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure you guys subscribe so you don't miss a single thing. We're getting all things Modern Warfare, updates, news, information, tips, tricks, all that good stuff. We got you covered here on the channel. And with so much still that I want to talk about with Season 5 left and what may be a 2020 reveal somewhat on the horizon here, stick it here on the channel. So if you also want to follow me over on Twitter and Instagram, those are the best places to get connected outside of YouTube. Break them on both those. So if you guys want to strike up a conversation, ask me a question, whatever it may be, that link is down there in the description below. That said, thanks so much for watching. Mine has been Espresso. I'll see you guys later. Take care and peace.